This is truly like the messiest, like writing is messy, but I think this is the messiest part of the writing process for me. Hi, welcome back to my channel. So we are writing a new book. Not right now, but eventually, probably, definitely. I shouldn't say definitely. Why do I always say definitely? At some point in Q1. I'm currently planning the projects that I think I want to work on for 2022. These goals could shift. Like anything could happen between now and December. But today I thought I would start documenting at least the outlining process for potentially what could be my next writing project. If you've been like watching this channel for a while or whatever, I've been drafting draft 1 of Project Night, like my other adult fantasy novel. I started drafting it in July and it's almost done, but you know, I feel like we need to shake things up a little. So I recently had a burst of inspiration for a new book, specifically a new adult fantasy book, which I told myself last year that like I would take a break from fantasy and that I would go back to either my sci-fi project from 2 years ago or literally anything but fantasy. But then I just got like a burst of inspiration for a new adult fantasy idea and I started brainstorming and world building, but the characters haven't fully formed yet. The plot beats are kind of in my mind, but I haven't connected the dots yet. And the thing is, I usually don't start vlogging or like talking on my channel about any of my early works in progresses until after I start drafting. Like this is new for me to be doing this kind of video where I just like stream of consciousness talk about my ideas as I'm brainstorming them. But I thought it would be fun to like take you on my outlining process because I think outlining is a substantial part of the writing process for some people. I do talk a lot about like how I'm an outliner or whatever. I do value structure when I'm planning a novel, but in reality, I think it's actually more accurate for me to say that yes, I'm an outliner, but I do like to discovery write with a roadmap or like with intention, you know? Like if I'm pantsing with a compass. So I treat my outlines as that compass or that like vague roadmap. I make it as detailed as I possibly can, but knowing that things will inevitably change or shift and being open to those changes. The reason that I like to make all of these notes to make a chapter by chapter outline is because it helps me map out plot beats before I even get into the draft, and that just suits my writing personality. I found that a lot of the times, like when I would write stories when I was younger, a big reason that I would abandon so many of my projects was that I didn't like the feeling of not knowing a general idea of what I was working towards. I think, you know, obviously every writer is different. Some people hate outlines and that's fine too. As you will see, I think my style probably leans a little bit more into a traditional outliner, like on the spectrum of being an outliner versus a pantser. I'm probably still more on the outlining side of things. How my style has evolved within the last year and a half is that I kind of have found this happy medium. Hopefully this will be interesting. Kind of just wanted an excuse to chat a little bit about what could potentially be a new project that I work on this year, because I don't want this year to be like just a year of revision. I think in order for me to be like creatively fulfilled, I like to chase the new ideas as they come. That is all, and let's get into the video. Okay, so this book already has a nickname. I have nicknamed this project Project Aerith, and Project Aerith as in Aerith Gainsborough. It isn't like related to anything like Final Fantasy VII, like not even in its aesthetic. However, when I came up with this story idea, I happened to be playing Final Fantasy VII Remake over the holidays. There was like a throwaway line in a cutscene that it kind of just got the gears going for me, because basically in the back of my mind I was like already trying to coalesce this new story idea, and this was kind of like the final thing that I needed to sort of get my brainstorm going, you know? So basically, for the past few weeks, I've been toiling with this idea of like how I would approach what is this trope called? Like the wizard in the tower type trope. I didn't want to write about a literal wizard in the tower. That trope of like, you know, a character being forcibly sent to their supposed doom, only to discover that the place they've been sent to or sacrificed to isn't all that it seems. That's kind of that was the trope that I wanted to do. I was having a hard time figuring out like what the world would be and what kind of societal structure would support this cultural custom. It was like I had the idea of like what I wanted the vibe to be, but I didn't have like the scaffolding upon which I could build a story. And then for some reason, while I was playing Final Fantasy VII, it just kind of like helped the brainstorming process really kickstart. But yeah, brainstorming for me is very much like slowly and then all at once. Anyway, that's that. So the very first thing that I do when I have a new story idea is I'll enter what I call the brain dump stage. This is truly like the messiest. Like writing is messy, but I think this is the messiest part of the writing process for me. So it was kind of like with this story idea, I could feel it. It's kind of like a gut reaction. I could feel that this was an idea that was worth pursuing. It's basically just I dump all of my thoughts and I'll like literally have a conversation with myself, because I'll write down like every thought that comes into my head. None of it's organized. So sometimes it's like world building thoughts and then it's character thoughts. I don't try to organize it. I just write it all down. Even if it's like a small like idea for a scene, everything is important at this stage. I kind of sound like a psycho. Like if you go back and look at the brain dump documents, it's just like raw, unfiltered thoughts. However, I will say that one thing that I do like to think about early on as much as possible is themes. Theming is very important to start thinking about as early as possible, because for me, like theme colors the entire story. It's this like emotional anchor point for whatever narrative I'm trying to tell. So core themes I think of as like larger arguments that I'm trying to make as a writer. And so without it, I feel like I can't make plot beats and character arcs resonate. Hi, okay, sorry to pop in like this, but I lost a section of my footage while I was ranting. I was talking about core themes. For me, a plot without theme is kind of just like a series of events. And I think a character without theme is sometimes can feel like a person just acting on behalf of the plot. I think if I personally think about truly memorable character arcs, there is usually always some kind of core theme at the heart of their arc. So the example that I used was Azula, who's like a really beloved antagonist. And I think people really like Azula because you get this sense from her character that she's this very fully formed, she's had a type of upbringing that has fostered her system of skewed beliefs. So that thematic pillar at the core of her character, you know, seeing how indoctrination can become really insidious within a person, that theme of her character dovetails really well into the theme of the entire narrative of the show, which is that the world is better when no one culture puts themselves at the top and creates that system of indoctrination. And so anyway, I say all this to say that when I'm brainstorming and like trying to figure out all of this stuff, how themes bounce off of characters and plot, like I know that I'm not going to be able to outline all of that perfectly, but I do like to spend a good amount of time asking myself at the end of all of this, at the end of this story, what the heck am I trying to say? Like, what do I want? What sort of ideas do I want to contemplate and meditate on? Okay, sorry, I have one more thing to add. For Project Aerith, I think just knowing kind of the nature of the trope that I want to incorporate into this narrative, I think an exploration of gender roles is sort of necessary. And so I guess the resonant question that I want to try to tie in to this story, the character arcs and the world building, going to be the idea of how the rigidity of these systems can negatively affect this society. And then I think from those core themes, I think a lot of ideas for plot beats are going to arise. For example, like some of the questions that I had written down for myself was like, what are the systems in this society that perpetuate harmful ideologies? How can the establishment be challenged? And what are the things that are currently stopping it from being challenged? As well as, and this is where kind of like some spicy conflict, I think, can be explored, which is what are the ideological fractures that can arise when trying to challenge this system. Not everyone's opinions about how exactly to proceed is going to be the same. People have their own agendas. So that's kind of, I guess, where politics is gonna come in, but it's not going to be politics on as grand of a scale as I've written for like other stories, you know, because like some of my other books have been like world governments or empires, like that kind of thing. I kind of feel like this story is going to have an intimacy to it. That's kind of where I'm going to start trying to build plot around. I was just doing a little bit more brainstorming because I got some ideas like while I was talking, and I've been thinking about it, and I don't think that Project Aerith is going to necessarily have colonialism as a core theme, because my current book that I'm writing right now, Project Night, it's also an adult fantasy, but the vibe is like totally different. That book definitely has a lot of like colonialism or anti-colonialism themes in it, and I just don't think that Project Aerith is going to be that kind of book. I think I want to pull loosely from like pre-colonial Filipino culture, pre-Christianity. That's what I'm feeling right now. So I think that it'll be a nice change of pace. So that's kind of where my brainstorming is at right now. I've also been I've been fleshing out a lot of the world building. I'll talk about that another day after this. But one thing that I forgot to mention was the antagonist. So one of the main things that I've been wanting to tackle for a really long time now, and I think this might be the book to do it, is the like idea of a non-physical antagonist, or something that isn't necessarily a person or a group of people or a monster. I've been wanting to do that for a while now. I just haven't found the right story to support it, but I think this one might work. Something environmental or psychological or a mix of both. Still figuring out that part. I think it's just, I've written a lot of stories that tend to have like power squabbles. Project Moon, which was my first fantasy book, that one was definitely like courtroom politics. Project Night is kind of like gang politics. I think writing about some kind of like internal politics is going to be unavoidable for this story, because I think there's just like, humans are messy, and I think some interesting character arcs can arise from like the people in power and like the differing opinions that they have about how to uphold whatever establishment. But I don't think I want to emphasize that as much with this story. I'm gonna really try to like keep the narrative contained to just the two main characters and like their journey, because I tend to get really like caught up in world building and fleshing out side characters, and I think it's important to do that, but I don't know if I need to necessarily put all of those ideas onto the page, because I tend to have a habit of doing that. So it's been a few days. The notes have been flowing a little bit. I think I can show you guys like a general idea of how I format my notes. Obviously, I'm gonna have to leave sections like redacted and stuff like that, but I'm just gonna like talk through my thought process of how I structured my notes. It varies depending on the type of project. So this isn't what my notes always look like. Sometimes for other books, like it's way less organized. Sometimes it's even more organized. So it very much depends on the project. I think the general structure of how I go from brainstorming to organizing is mostly the same. So hopefully it'll like kind of make sense. So I take that initial brain dump document and I make an entirely new document, because the brain dump document is very, very messy and I can't work off of it. It's gonna be too hard to create an outline when all of the notes are extremely disorganized. So when I'm formatting this new document, usually at the top, I'll write out the genre, ideas for comps, and then I'll also leave a space for a working blurb. I don't actually fill out all of this stuff until after I've written out my notes, or even after I've started out my outline. I just leave a space for it so that I remember to like fill it out, or if I get ideas as I'm making notes, I can go back and fill it out. Then I also leave a space for plot beats, which I'll talk about later. Again, I don't fill that out right now. And then I go into my sections for world building, magic system, if it's a fantasy, characters, and theme. One important thing to note is that I don't fill out all of these sections in sequential order. So even though I'm laying out all of these sections, the reason that I lay it out in advance is because I'm really like scatterbrained when I'm brainstorming. So I'll like start writing out ideas for one section, and then as I'm, creating ideas, I'll get ideas for another section, which is why I like to lay out all the sections and headers in advance so that I can easily jump around the document. Okay, world building. Hello, hi. If you made it this far into the video, thank you so much. I did not realize how much raw footage I actually had. I filmed this video over the course of many days and I just started rambling. I didn't want this video to be like 40-50 minutes long. I think it's actually going to be more digestible and comprehensible if I split this video up into two. Part 2, I will talk about basically world building and character arcs and how I approach planning and outlining that. So all of that is going to be in part 2 of this video, which I will put out right after this one. And lastly, I know I already mentioned this like in one of my community posts, but as far as my uploading schedule goes for 2022, I'm gonna try my best to post as regularly as possible, but writing obviously comes first. So I will always be prioritizing like my writing schedule, just like a fair warning. And that is all. Thank you guys as always for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.